Good afternoon. I am Danielle Gletow, and these are Manolo Blahniks. For those of you who don't know what Manolo Blahniks are, they are incredibly beautiful shoes that cost a lot of money. And for a really long time, in fact, much of my adult life, I equated owning these Manolo Blahniks with success and stature and importance. These shoes defined who I was. And I worked really hard to get these shoes. And for a while, I didn't feel all that valuable without them, which is pretty embarrassing and uncomfortable to say today, because I certainly did not start out this way. I was a really smart kid. I studied very hard, and I spent hours and hours in my room writing stories and studying and reading books, and I thrived on getting straight A's. I was in accelerated classes throughout elementary school and middle school, and I was so proud to come home having achieved honor roll every single semester. And then one day, I got a taste of what I thought beautiful was. I started hanging out with the girls in school that had all of the prettiest faces and the nicest clothes, and of course, the most fabulous shoes. And I decided that I was going to throw away everything I worked so hard for to focus on this new dream of being one of those girls. I wanted to walk in their shoes. And so after high school, I wasted a year and $20,000 at a private university where I did tons and tons of partying and very little studying. And I came home and racked up another $20,000 very quickly in debt, but I certainly looked fantastic. So 9 years ago, my life looked very different than it looks today. My husband Joe and I had just gotten married. We were both working wonderful jobs in a corporate environment, earning big salaries. We lived in a nice house. We spent our weeks working long hours and our weekends going out to super fancy dinners and hosting parties at our home. We had a lot of really nice stuff. And then we became foster parents. My husband and I decided that we wanted to become parents by adopting through the foster care system. And we did it for no other reason than it felt right to us, and we wanted to give a needy child a good home. So after about a year of fingerprints, home studies, and background checks, we became licensed foster adoptive parents in the state of New Jersey. And what that meant is that we would receive phone calls for children who were being placed with a primary goal or a very high likelihood of becoming available for adoption. And even before we received that written certification, we got a phone call about our first placement. Jose. At 18 months old, Jose arrived at our home late at night wearing nothing but a huge oversized coat and a onesie, and he wasn't even wearing any shoes. He came to us because his parents had been incarcerated on charges of abuse, his siblings were placed in another home, and he was scared and confused, and we were complete strangers to him. Suddenly, our entire lives became about making this little boy comfortable. And as more and more details emerged about the life he had lived, the more heartbroken we were, imagining what this little boy had gone through. And just as quickly as the details emerged about his life, we learned as well that he wasn't going to be the little boy that we had hoped to adopt. And so 3 months later, we packed up his belongings, all of his little pairs of shoes, and we sent him away to go live with an aunt. It wasn't very long after that, just a couple of weeks actually, that we got another phone call about our second placement, a little boy named Tone. Tone came to us after he had just turned 2 years old. He was really skinny, and he barely knew how to walk. And he didn't say anything. He would just grunt once in a while and point to things. And one night, while I was giving him a bath, I noticed that Tone was covered in little round burn marks on his arms and on the trunk of his body. And I immediately started to cry. I couldn't believe that in 2 short years of living, this little boy had gone through things that most of us will spend an entire lifetime never having to face. I was heartbroken thinking about what he had seen in his mother's apartment as she engaged in illegal activity in front of him time and time again. But life with Antonio was wonderful. My husband and I loved our position as parents. We took him everywhere. I dressed him and my husband up in matching outfits for every holiday. We bought him every single pair of adorable little boy shoes you could imagine. We were so happy as a family. Our lives were still spent working hard during the week, but on the weekends, all that life was about was making this little boy happy, giving him great memories. And then we got a phone call. A caseworker called us seemingly out of nowhere and said that because his mother had completed a very short drug rehabilitation program and her most recent child was born negative for drug exposure, they were going to immediately reunify the family. And I pleaded with the caseworker to give us more time, to give her more time, to make sure he was returning to a safe environment. And despite my best efforts writing to legislators and judges, I was not successful. And 6 months after he came to us, we had to pack up all of Antonio's things and kiss him goodbye. And we knew we would never see him again. And this devastated us. My husband and I decided at that point we would take a break from fostering, and we spent a week at the beach to heal. And during that time, my husband came to me and said, "I'm done. I can't do this. I can't deal with the caseworkers missing appointments. I can't deal with the misinformation. I can't deal with losing the children." But I knew I wasn't done. I knew that we came alive as parents. I knew that this is what we were here for. But I also knew that we needed some time to take a break. While we would still get some phone calls from placements from time to time, I would tell the caseworkers that our schedules were exceptionally full and that we couldn't take any placements right now. And inside, I would just die a little bit more. I missed being a parent. I missed having children. I missed the complete chaos in our house of chasing after little ones and raising them and wondering what they were going to be and watching them smile at the most silly things. And so my husband and I decided we would try to become parents the old-fashioned way. And that didn't work so well either. Months and months were passing, and although we were very young and seemingly very healthy, I wasn't getting pregnant. And all I kept thinking is, this has got to be some kind of a cruel joke. How is the universe taking the one thing away from me that I know I'm here for? I'm supposed to be a mommy. Why isn't this happening for us? And so one night, as I was picking up dinner, I got a phone call. And it was a friend of mine who had been fostering that we had met in our training, and she had been fostering for years, and she said, "A caseworker is going to call you. He has a little baby that they're placing with a goal for adoption. It's a little girl." And so when the caseworker called me, I answered the phone and I immediately said, "Yes, yeah, we'll take her." She was just 3 days old. And then I had to go home and ask my husband. So I walked in the door with sushi and said, "Hey, I just got a phone call and we can get a little baby tonight. What do you think?" And he just looked completely baffled. And he said, "I thought we were done with fostering." And I said, "No, you're done with fostering. I'm not done." And so I begged and pleaded, and about an hour passed and lots of tears, and he finally said, "Yes, okay, but I don't want to have to say I told you so. And by the way, you don't even want a girl." And then, about an hour later, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door, and there she was, my baby. And the second that I held her in my arms, I knew she was going to be mine forever. This little baby, 3 days old, and I fell in love with her instantly. And then 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And so we very quickly went from a struggling couple wanting to be parents to a family of 4, seemingly overnight. And adopting Mia was not easy. There was a lot of paperwork, but we always remained positive that she was someday going to be our little girl. And at that point, we decided we were done with fostering. Our family was getting full, our house was not getting any bigger, and we decided that we were going to close our home for good. But I knew in my heart I was not done with fostering. I knew that the foster care system still needed me in some way. And so I spent every moment that I wasn't feeding or playing with the baby, and I studied the system, trying to identify what was being offered versus what the children were receiving. I read reports, I made connections with local nonprofit agencies, and I tried to find out as much as I could about what foster children were facing. Because what I saw was the infants and toddlers that we had been fostering were just the tip of the iceberg. There were hundreds of children within the organization that I sat on the board of directors for that were in and out of the group homes that we ran, that I saw that were in the system, that were going without most of what you and I would consider parts of a normal childhood. Their childhoods weren't about playing team sports and having ice cream cones and birthday parties and shopping for nice clothes and new shoes. Their childhoods were about sibling visits and court hearings and wondering where they were going to spend their next birthdays. And I wanted to give these kids a voice. I wanted to show these children that there were so many more people out there pulling for them to succeed. And so while I was on my maternity leave with Liliana, I sat and I created a business plan for an organization I knew in my core had to be created. I wanted to find a way to harness the power of all the kindness and all of the good intentions of the people who came to us and said, I want to do something, but I don't know how. One Simple Wish was born in 2008. It was created as a website, a wish list of items and experiences that children in foster care were going without. The items and experiences that most of us remember as just part of childhood. The items and experiences that would dictate not only who we spent our time with, but who we would ultimately become. When it first launched in December of 2008, we were happy to just get a few visits, and I was thrilled when I knew the people that were granting wishes. But soon after, I was even prouder because I didn't know the people granting the wishes. It was becoming increasingly difficult for me to juggle raising 2 babies, working a 60-hour work week, managing a $4 million pharmaceutical account, and attempting to grow this big organization. So as soon as I'd get home, I'd kick off those Jimmy Choos and Manolo Blahniks, and I would throw on some flats. And suddenly they became my shoe of choice. And I would run around again, reading reports and finding out as much information as I could, connecting with other agencies doing fantastic work for children in the foster care system so that they knew we were a resource for them. I lined my office walls with information about child abuse and the child welfare system and all the ways in which we were failing America's invisible children. I would talk to anybody who would listen to me about these kids. And soon that wasn't enough. Soon I traded in those flats for some running shoes so I could squeeze in some working out along with everything else that I was doing and stay on top of all of this new information and make sure that the programs we were building through One Simple Wish were truly addressing the actual needs of kids in the foster care system. And then one day was the moment when I knew that I had to take a leap. I had gotten dressed up very nice that day. I was wearing one of my best Manolos, and I was sitting in a meeting discussing a print campaign with about 24 of my colleagues. And as I looked around the room and started calculating in my head the amount of money that we were spending in that meeting, I was amazed. 24 people times hundreds of dollars an hour times 2 hours. And do you know what we were discussing? Purple. Whether or not the ad was the right purple. Too purple, not purple enough. And I looked down at my $500 pair of shoes, and I thought, I'm done. I went to one of my coworkers later that day, and I said, I can't do this anymore, but I'm so scared. I'm used to a housekeeper. I'm used to going out shopping and spending $500 on shoes, $600 on a handbag, $300 on dinner. I'm used to this life. I want a big house. I want big fancy vacations. And he said, you are one of the few people that I know that knows exactly what you want to do with your life. Your shoes are not going to disappear. You can still wear them. So go and do what you know you were meant to do. And I went home that night and I came and I told my husband, I want to quit. And he looked at me without anything further and he said, so quit. Go do what you love. And the next day I did. And I left behind those dreams of more fancy shoes and a bigger house and bigger vacations, and instead I threw myself into my work, and I never felt more alive. When I had to talk about marketing and my role in my organization, it used to pain me to tell people what I did, but I came alive when I talked about foster children. I came alive when I talked about the work One Simple Wish was doing to make sure that every child out there felt valuable, felt loved, and felt like they had a network of support even if they never met these people. I felt like I finally found exactly why I went through everything I had gone through with Jose and Tone and my 2 little girls. I became a mom to 400,000 children, a very proud and happy mom. And so, some more time passed, and One Simple Wish was growing, and growing and growing and growing. So here I am today. What started out in my tiny home office with $24,000 in donations in our first year has grown to being an organization that serves children in 46 states through 600 community partners. We have granted over 9,000 wishes to children in foster care and youth aging out, and we have impacted the lives of 30,000 young people. Thank you. I've been on NBC Nightly News. I was named a top 10 CNN hero. I've been on the Katie Couric Show. We've had such incredible exposure, and with each bit of exposure, hundreds and hundreds of wishes get granted. Hundreds and hundreds of memories are created. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of children learn that they matter. Somebody is looking out for them. And one of the best things about this is I've really, really learned to love shoes again. But not the kind that cost $500. These kind. These are the Uggs that we bought for Sarah when she graduated the Army's basic training program after aging out of foster care without being adopted and without being reunified with her family. These are one pair of the 24 pair of career shoes that we sent to Washington, D.C. to help young people who were completing an independent living program learn to get themselves back into the workforce, learn interview skills and professionalism. These are the 6 pair of sneakers that I hand-delivered to a family struggling to keep their children out of the foster care system for years. The shoes on my feet do not tell you who I am. The ones on this screen do. And so today, I'm going to take these shoes off, and I'm going to leave them here, and I mean it. And I hope that somebody takes them. You could sell them, you could throw them away, you could keep them and wear them, they're a size 7.5. But I don't need them anymore. Thank you.